Greetings, everyone. P. Pardo here from Comic Book Users. Welcome to another episode of the show. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper look into a character that Bill and I did a video of years ago. It was one of our most popular videos for quite a while. The character is Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze. Of course, a pulp hero character created by Lester Dent / Kenneth Robeson, whichever is the real name. I think Lester Dent was actually his real name, but he went under the pseudonym of Kenneth Robeson for many, many years. This was a pulp character that debuted back in the 1930s. Lots of different stories published in magazines and pulp fiction, not the movie Pulp Fiction, but pulp fiction publications throughout the 30s and 40s. Eventually they took those original stories published in that era and started putting them into paperback books. So you had like the little pulp magazines and little the large scale books back in the day, and then Bantam Books did a whole run. I have almost the complete run of all 200 something volumes of Bantam Books. One book per each story. Generally, they ran anywhere from like 90 to 150 pages long for the books, and with great cover art, iconic cover art by Mr. Bama himself, right? That would turn out to be the iconic look for Doc Savage as well, right? The dark skin colored strongman, kind of like bronze colored skin strongman with the ripped shirt and the tightly cut hair that basically looked like a skull cap. And on every cover, he's battling some sort of villain or in some kind of situation or another. In many cases, the Bama's cover artwork almost eclipsed the stories that were included within. I mean, that's how I grew up loving Doc Savage. I started at a very, very young age. I was always been a big reader my whole life, and I don't remember where I was, or maybe my parents got me a couple of Bantam books with Doc Savage. I saw them out somewhere, and you can get them really, really cheap back then in the early mid 70s, and that started my whole lifelong love for this character and all the side characters that are included in the Doc Savage stories. So kind of the purpose of this episode today is to talk a little bit about all the stops and starts over the years between Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Dark Horse Comics, Image. I mean, there's so many different comic publications had decided to take a stab at Doc Savage, and ultimately none of them wound up lasting all that long. Maybe DC's run lasted the longest, to be honest with you, but I think Marvel made a really good start, and it just didn't really go anywhere. So, of course, we've got Clark Savage Jr. is, of course, the main character here. Of course, his father was a great philanthropist and traveler and, of course, rich beyond belief. And he raised his son to be like a perfect human specimen. He goes through this exercise routine everywhere. He has razor sharp hearing and eyesight, great agility and stamina, almost superhuman strength, right? But a very kind of reserved, not overly talkative kind of guy. He's got this group of aides. We call them the Doc Savage aides with him. We've got Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Blodgett, otherwise known as Monk Mayfair, who is an industrial chemist. Short of stature. They always say he had kind of like simian appearances. Probably one of the two most popular characters in the books and in the comics that got the most, I don't want to call it screen time, but the most time of all the aides. That you would, almost every episode, every issue, every story had Monk as a major character of the story, along with Brigadier General Theodore Marley Ham Brooks, who was an accomplished attorney. Monk always called him the shyster. They were best of friends, but always at each other's throats all the time. He always called him the dapper shyster, right? But always well dressed. He had the cane with the little knife point at the end of it, right? Very, very well spoken, very intelligent guy. You had Colonel John Rennie Renwick, a construction engineer, big, tough guy, always had a lot to say, very loud, with gigantic fists, right? You have Major Thomas Long Tom Roberts, who's electrical engineer. All right. You've got William Harper, otherwise known as Johnny Littlejohn, who was an archaeologist and geologist. All right. He was always one with the big, very smart, scientific vocabulary, right? So those guys all made up the aides, and they generally would accompany Doc on all of his adventures. And basically, almost every single story in every single book starts off with someone coming to Doc and his aides needing help for something. So basically every single story is some sort of villain or bad guy or organization or something that's doing something wrong, and someone who is being wronged by them go to Doc and his group for help, and there the adventure begins. And in almost every single instance, one or more of the aides wind up getting captured. Doc and the rest have to come to the rescue. It's very simple plot lines and very predictable, but there's so much fun. And Dent/Robeson always made the interplay and the dialogue between all of them so good, and they're always action-packed, which is what's really, really great. I think, and of course they had their headquarters was up on the 86th floor of a New York City skyscraper, which everybody always assumed was the Empire State Building. They never really actually say that. They also have the Fortress of Solitude. They have the secret hangar down on the Hudson River where they go and they can get in either a little helicopter or boat or something like that. And the Fortress of Solitude was their place over in the Arctic Circle somewhere. So very, very cool stuff. A kind of a precursor to all the superheroes like Batman and Superman and whatnot. I think, one of the things, and we'll kind of get to here, is that I think even in the books, in the stories, there was no real consistent villains that would pop up all the time, save for John Sunlight, who would appear a couple of times. But for the most part, every issue was a different villain or group of bad guys. They were always defeated, and then that's that, right? On to the next adventure. And as we know, and we've talked about, some of these comic book series that don't have these like consistent major villains that pop up from time to time that they've really built up well and built their characters, those comics tend to not last. And I think that this was something that hurt the books to an extent. Sometimes some people like the fact that each book, each story is a different story unrelated to the one that happened before. Whereas, nowadays you get these big, long storyline arcs that just go on and on and on forever. But, back especially for comics, back in the 70s and the 80s, you had to have consistently good villains. And I think that, this didn't, right? So let's start to the beginning with 1972. We've got issue number 1 from Marvel. All right, so as you can see right off the bat, I should have brought some of the books. I didn't, but I could have brought some of the Bantam books to show you the bomber cover art, but I think most of you probably already know what it looks like. So, of course, they're going for that look here. This, of course, John Buscema artwork. Off to a good start, right? Most of these Marvel issues are interpretations of actual stories written by Dent or Robeson. So they're not doing their all original stuff at this point. There's a Jim Steranko cover, issue number 2, The Feathered Serpent, which of course, kind of a continuation. Here is God, who drew this cover? Was this a Steranko cover as well? Might have been. I don't quite remember. Issue number 3, Silver Death's Head. So this one here, issue number 4, this was the first one I purchased off the rack. And I had to buy, I bought this copy probably, 15, 20 years ago. I had to replace my original issue because it was just in horrible, horrible condition, because I used to read this over and over and over and over and over again. Good stuff there. Here we have, again, taking a story from the books, The Monsters, Night of the Monsters. This, I believe, is a Gil Kane cover, number 5. These, for the most part, are pretty well done. I'll open up one of them after I get through all of these. Here we've got Where Giants Walk, another Gil Kane cover, issue number 6. Here's a Rich Buckler cover, one of my favorite issues, and one of my favorite stories, issue number 7, The Brand of the Werewolf. And this is a very, very cool, the story here is very, very cool. I love the book itself. It's one of the earlier issues, and they actually moved this into two issues here to tell the whole story, which they did. And then, inexplicably, that was it. So maybe they never really intended it to be much longer than that. They also released a giant size issue, which coincided with the release of the movie starring Ron Ely in 1975. And this basically just is just the reprints of the first issue and some more, and I think the second issue as well, just to coincide with the movie. So let's just open up one of these real quick. Let's take, I'll just randomly pick issue number 3. All right, so I think, besides for the whole villain thing, the problem and here we got Ross Andru art. These are pretty action-packed. I think when you take a literary figure who has a long history in, book format, and you try to interpret the characters in like a comic book form, it doesn't always work out, right? Because sometimes you already have a visual of what you think these characters should look like and how they should be speaking. And then, this here, it's up to the artist's interpretation. And sometimes, it doesn't always match. And a longtime reader of the Doc Savage books could be like, well, that's not really what I envision all them looking like. Here you can see, the whole skull cap thing, it looks a little ridiculous, I will admit, but that's what I grew up as Doc looking like. Always with the kind of like the vest without the sleeves, very rarely wearing normal shirts and whatnot. But these were fun, they were action-packed. But again, you got different artists working throughout the series. If I remember correctly, we'll pop the other one open here. If we go all the way to the last issue, let's see. I don't remember exactly who was working on it towards the end. But in a lot of these short-lived series, you just had inconsistency. So here we got Rich Buckler, Tom Palmer, Jack Abel, all working on the art here. So there's that inconsistency across the artist teams, which never really helps. Here's Doc's cousin as well. You can tell her with bronze skin as well. So, typical 70s style Marvel art. Nothing spectacular, nothing terrible. So what Marvel decided to do, because obviously sales were not great for this book, but they did decide, due to the somewhat little bit of popularity that the movie was getting, it was not a blockbuster by any means, but they anticipated that it might be, they decided to run Doc Savage back again, but this time bring him to their Curtis line of black and white magazines. So here we've got, this is Ron Ely, of course, so this is a tie-in to the George Pal film, Doc Savage, The Man of Bronze. And whether they knew this was going to be an actual series, I don't know right from the get-go, but it did run for a number of issues. So here we have issue number 2. So all of a sudden now we're moving back to the Bama depiction. This, of course, is Ken Bauer doing the cover art there. Here we got more. Again, these look just like the Bantam books, which again were being published hot and heavy at the time. All right, these are all new stories here. I always thought this one was kind of cool. The Loch Ness Monster. This was the first one that I bought off the rack. Again, I think going a little too overboard with the skull cap look. It kind of looks ridiculous there. It doesn't look like real hair, which I think was the problem on some of these. Mayan Mutations. And again, let's open up one of these, just so you can see kind of what was going on the inside. Does Doc look better in the black and white medium? Well, you be the judge of that. I think some of these stories, especially on the latter issues of the Black and White magazine, got a little far-fetched. And again, not a lot of consistency with the artwork, which doesn't help. But at least you did get like pretty much full-length stories. So these were well worth the price. These were, what, $1 at the time. You did get some articles in here and things, but for the most part, these are full new stories, not really based on the Dent originals, which, that's kind of what you had to do. Although, quite frankly, if they still had the rights to recreate the Dent original stories, like I said, with over 200 different stories, you had plenty of stories to utilize. They chose not to do that, which, hey, whatever. Fast forward a number of years, right? So, of course, what did I say, 8 issues and pretty much of each, right? What did I say, 8 issues on these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 issues on the Black and White magazine, 8 issues on the color comic. That was it. That was the end of Marvel's run. However, the character would appear in Marvel 2-in-1, there's an issue where Doc appears with the Thing. I believe he's also in a Marvel team-up issue, with Spider-Man. That's basically about it. They didn't oversaturate, because again, Doc Savage is a character from the past, right? Even all these stories, they do take place in like the 30s and the 40s. So whenever he would appear later on in a Marvel comic, it was more of kind of like a going back in time or type of thing. That's when he would appear. But that would be it. There was, after those 2 appearances, you really wouldn't see Doc Savage anymore in Marvel. But DC did decide to pick up the mantle. They did like a 4-issue run in the mid-'80s, and then Dark Horse picked up some stuff, and you would see Doc appear here and there in DC Comics, but then in the early 2000s, with the whole first wave run that they were doing, they would launch an 18-issue run. First wave Doc Savage. I have all but the first issue and the last issue, strangely enough. They're okay. Honestly, I haven't read these in years, and they also do have Justice Inc. stories in them as well. Some of these covers are pretty bad. Some of the artwork is pretty bad. All right. They started eventually to kind of try and recreate the Bama style, which you'll see very shortly. So here, this kind of strange looking cover. But Brian Azzarello worked on a lot of these. So here, that's obviously a nod to the old Bama covers. And I'll open up one of these so we can kind of take a look at it. Issue number 10. So as the series gone on, the artwork got a little bit better, at least on the covers. I always like this one with the mummy. Maybe that's the one I'll open up. And here, if you remember the books, there were plenty of issues where Doc and the aides come into contact with what appears to be prehistoric creatures, right? That's the thing. Most of these monsters and creatures in the old books on appearance turned out to be fake or not actually what you thought you were seeing. That's a really good cover right there. So let's open up the mummy one. I think it's the one I said. So again, this lasted for 18 issues in DC. I also have I believe it was part of the first wave too. I have a graphic novel with Doc Savage and Batman, which is pretty cool as well. So here we've got art by King Ping Mu. I'm not familiar with King Ping Mu, but so now you can see this is the 2000s type of comic book art. Glossy pages, not a ton of dialogue, way too many ads. I have these in my collection. Honestly, I've looked at them for years and said, do I really need these? Because I just never really enjoyed them all that much. To me, they're just missing the spirit of the stories from the 30s and 40s, and even the artwork on the 70s books, I think, was closer to what you envision the character looks. And that's another thing too. I think that seeing, especially for the Doc character, if you look at some of the old pulp magazines from back in the day and the way they drew Doc on the covers of some of those, he looked just like a normal guy with medium length hair and dressed pretty good, and not this hulking Superman guy with the dark skin and the ridiculous skull cap, right? So to a lot of people who read the Doc Savage stories back then from the pulp books and the pulp magazines, that's the image you have ingrained in your head about what Doc Savage should look like. Me, I grew up with the 70s stuff, so that's, this is kind of what I envisioned Doc Savage to look like. But I don't know. To me, I always thought this was a no-brainer character to really do well in the comic format, because he's a comic book character. He's a pulp character. It's no different than the early superheroes like the Flash and Superman and Batman. And like Batman, he doesn't have any superpowers. So I never understood why this character never took off in the comic book format. Again, maybe it comes down to not enough memorable villains. Maybe there's too much going on, too many aides, a lot of these, but then again, you got the team books, right? Like Avengers and whatnot, Defenders, they had lots of team members, Justice League, right? So I don't think it's really that. These are also, too, a lot of the storylines are very detective-y, right? Trying to find clues to the whereabouts of villains and how they did this, and every story is like trying to solve this mystery. Maybe that's a little too demanding of, kids in the 70s, comic book readers. I don't know. I like that aspect of it. It's one of the reasons why I always like Batman's detective comics, because I like the detective-y version of Batman, like the intricate plots and, the kind of how and the why and who did it and all that sort of thing. So I don't know. I never understood why this character never really took off. You could say things like different writers, different artists every issue and whatnot. Maybe the black and white magazine, maybe they tried to do too many original storylines. I think all the storylines were already there. All you got to do is go to the books. They're all there. I mean, that's basically what they did for the initial color run. And they chose, really not to do that for the black and white for the most part. So I don't really know. And then, this many years later, it's why probably they haven't been able to jumpstart another movie or TV show, even though it's been talked over and over and over again. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, was supposed to star in a film. Then a couple of years ago, they were going to make it into a series, and here we are in 2025, and that hasn't happened yet either. So I don't know. It's almost like the character of Doc Savage and his band of aides, and his band-aids, were just never meant to really succeed anywhere outside of the actual books and short stories. I don't know. I love the character. I find, like I said, I have 200 and something of the books, the single books, and I love to read them every so often as like palate cleansers in between reading other things. So every now and then, I've read a couple of rock biographies, I've read some horror, some fiction, and I'm just like, all right, I need something really simple that's just good guys versus bad guys, 125 pages, just, characters I've known my entire life, and lots of action, and boom. And you read it in 2 days, and you're like, okay, good, now I can go on to something else. That's kind of the Doc Savage character to me. So, So hope you like this little kind of deeper dive into the Man of Bronze, Doc Savage. And maybe you have some additional insight into why you think this character has never truly succeeded in either Marvel or DC Comics on a longer scale. We've had these little bursts, but as a long-standing character, just never really seemed to click. And don't know why. But at least we have all this stuff to enjoy. That's the good thing. So thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as a post. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also, we got the link down below to the Sea of Tranquility merch page where you can get yourself a Comic Book Users t-shirt or coffee mug. It helps the channel. Thank you very much if you do. And we'll see you soon here with more stuff. I am Pete Bartle. Thanks for watching. See you in a couple days. Bye-bye.